In this video, we'll take a look at how to draw a realistic eye with graphite pencils. For this demonstration, I'll be using Bristol paper, and I'll be using the smooth surface. I'll be using 3 graphite pencils, an H pencil, an HB pencil, and a General's Layout pencil. We'll start by lightly sketching the contours of the shape of the eye using the H pencil. We'll loosely draw a line for the upper lid and the lower portion of the eye, and reserve a space for the tear duct. Inside of the shape, we'll draw a circular shape for the iris, another one for the pupil, and we'll reserve an area for the highlight. We'll also draw some of the visible lines around the eye, like the top of the eyelid and a little bit of a crease underneath the bottom portion of the eye. We'll make a few gestural marks to indicate some of the texture, which we'll fill in later in the drawing. Then we can go ahead and start filling in the darker values that exist in the pupil. I'm still working here with the H pencil. Even within the highlight, a few mid-tone values exist. We'll darken up the edges of the iris before making marks extending outward from the center portion of the pupil. One of the most important things to consider when creating a representational graphite drawing is that graphite is great for layering. Just like you would approach a painting or a colored pencil drawing, we'll layer applications of graphite, progressively darkening the values as we go. We'll preserve another area of highlight that exists on the right portion of the iris and add a bit of shadow just underneath the eyelid. Then we'll start the process of progressively making the values a bit darker, still sticking with the H pencil at this point. Most folks believe that the lines that extend from the center portion of the pupil are just straight lines, but if you look closely at an iris, you'll understand that there's a collection of organic shapes that happen. While most of the lines are straight, there are a few exceptions. We'll include these organic shapes as we develop the iris. There's also quite a remarkable range of values that exist in the iris. We're starting light here, but you'll notice throughout the drawing that we progressively make these values a bit darker. You'll also notice that the values are quite a bit darker closer to the pupil and around the edges of the iris as well. As we continue to work our way around the iris, we're careful to preserve the area of highlight. Right now, the highlight does not look very strong because the values around it are relatively light, but as the drawing progresses, you'll notice that the highlight becomes a bit stronger as the contrast increases. We'll continue to apply applications of the H graphite pencil, progressively making the values quite a bit darker. Now we're ready to layer HB pencil applications over the top. The HB pencil is slightly softer as far as the graphite goes, thus producing a darker mark. We'll start in the area of the pupil, and then we'll progress to areas of the iris, again slightly darkening the value as we go. It's important to understand that we perceive value, which of course is the darkness or lightness of color, based on the values around the value that we're evaluating. In other words, it's all about contrast. At this point, our values are relatively light, so you'll notice that throughout the drawing, we'll continue to revisit the pupil and areas within the iris, progressively making them darker after we've applied a bit of value to the areas around the center portion of the eye. To carry this point further, we have a strong highlight that exists on the lower portion of the eye. To make this strong highlight stand out a bit further, we'll darken the values around it. With a blending stump, we can revisit the iris, lightly blending the applications that we've made. It's important not to get too overzealous with this process and smooth out all of the transitions. We just want to work the graphite slightly into the tooth or texture of the paper. Now we'll move on to the tear duct, which in this case is going to be very, very dark in value. But here again, we'll start with the H pencil and lightly build up those darker values. We'll also slightly darken the value underneath the top eyelid. Now we're ready for our softest pencil. In this case, I'm using a General's Layout pencil, which is about equivalent to a 4B. Again, we'll revisit the pupil, which will be the area of darkest value in the drawing. And here again, we'll progressively darken the values around the outside portion of the pupil and the outside portions of the iris, especially making the value a bit darker on the top portion where we've got a bit of shadow. Sticking with the softer graphite pencil, we'll begin the process of darkening the area of the tear duct. Because the softer graphite pencil leaves a grainy appearance, we can go over the top of it with an H pencil and smooth out that texture a bit. Now we'll start to add a bit of value to the white part of the eye on the right side of the drawing. We'll start again with the H pencil. We'll apply very light applications here, progressively building up darker values. And just as we saw with the iris and the tear duct, there is a variation of value that happens here. Not only does the value gradate from darker to lighter as it gets closer to the iris, but there's also subtle areas of lighter value that occur there as well. Now we'll start addressing some of the darker values that happen on the underside of the top eyelid. We'll again start with the H graphite pencil. It's important, if you're trying to create a representational drawing, to pay close attention to these subtle changes of value. They may not seem very important, but it adds to the realism of your drawing if you are able to include them. We'll slightly darken the crease and the bit of shadow that happens as it recedes backwards. Then we'll switch over to the softer graphite pencil and make the values quite a bit darker. The eyelid itself, of course, is a three-dimensional form, so it does create a bit of coarse shadow underneath it. We'll slightly darken this area with the softer graphite pencil. And then progressively, we'll start to build up the darker values that happen around the crease. There are a few strong wrinkles that happen on the left side of this crease, so we'll include them. Then, to soften some of the texture produced by the softer graphite pencil, we'll go over these applications with the H graphite pencil. Again, this helps to work the graphite into the tooth of the paper, eliminating a lot of the texture. Now we'll start to apply some of the values that happen on the lower portion of the eye. Of course, these values are quite a bit lighter overall because this portion of the eye does receive a bit more light. Of course, we want to create the illusion of skin texture in these areas. Now, texture is all dependent on the relationship of values and the contrast of those values. So we're sure to leave some areas of lighter value as we start to create shapes of darker value. Here again, we're going to progressively build up the contrast in these areas, again by starting with the H graphite pencil initially before switching over to the HB pencil. The shapes of value that we create on either side of the eye to create this texture are more compact and smaller on either side of the eye. We'll progressively make the shapes of darker value in between a bit darker, making the areas of lighter value appear lighter. Here with the HB pencil, we'll start to push these value relationships. It's important to note here that layering graphite in this manner to produce a realistic drawing does require quite a bit of patience. Work slowly and deliberately and gradually build up the value relationships, and you're sure to find success in your own drawings. Pay close attention to those subtle changes of value, and you'll be able to create the texture that you're actually seeing with your eyes. We'll use the HB pencil in areas to smooth out transitions of value before moving back to the tear duct with the softer graphite pencil, again pushing the value relationships and the contrast in the image. We'll also apply just a touch of the softer graphite pencil to some of the skin texture. And again, darken the crease right above the eye. Now with the H pencil, we'll start to create some of that skin texture on the left side of the eye where we have part of the skin visible. Again, we'll locate areas of lighter value and darken in the values around them. These shapes of lighter and darker value are again smaller and more concentrated on the left portion. However, as we work our way across the top portion of the eye towards the center and right side, these shapes become less visible. Now we'll go back with the H pencil again and start the process of darkening the shapes of value that happen in between. As we darken the value and increase the contrast, slowly the texture of the skin starts to appear. Periodically, we'll revisit the underside of the eyelid to make the values a bit darker. As we get more values on the surface, we have a better understanding of the contrast of value overall in the drawing. This is why it's important to revisit areas as you work through a drawing, steadily increasing the contrast. Now with the HB pencil, we'll push the values even darker. And again, as we work across the top and right portion of the eye, we'll continue the process of slowly darkening the values, increasing the contrast. Even though the shapes are less visible on the right side of the eye, there is still some variation in value that occurs here. In areas where the texture left by the softer graphite is too strong, we can use the blending stop to smooth out transitions. Now again, with the softer graphite pencil, we'll increase the contrast even further just underneath the eyelid, especially on the top portion of the iris. Now it's time to turn our attention to the eyelashes. And I know eyelashes can be quite intimidating, but eyelashes are simply a grouping of lines. It's important to point out that in this example, we're doing a male eye. Now, although there are no rules concerning how long the eyelashes should be for a male versus a female, typically I've noticed that the eyelashes for males are quite a bit shorter. We're just going to make organic lines that taper at the end. These lines, of course, are made boldly and deliberately with a sharpened HB pencil. For the top eyelid, these lines will go downward generally and then back up, almost like a check mark. For the bottom eyelashes, the opposite is true. The marks will go up and then outward and then back down, almost like an upside down check mark. Also, for the bottom eyelashes, the eyelashes are more spread out and less concentrated. You'll also notice that both for the top eyelashes and the bottom eyelashes, there's quite a bit of skin visible before the eyelashes begin. Now it's time to add some of the veins within the eye. We'll use the H pencil to make these marks. These lines, of course, change direction erratically. They shouldn't be overly strong, they should be quite subtle, which is why we're using the harder graphite for this. On the left side, the veins are also visible. It can be tempting to add quite a number of veins in the eyes. After all, this detail that we're adding here is lots of fun to add, but be careful that you don't overdo it. Usually a few light lines do the trick. Now we'll just increase the contrast a bit further using the softer graphite pencil, especially at the bottom portion of the iris and within the pupil. And now our realistic drawing of an eye with graphite pencils is complete. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel and head over to thevirtualinstructor.com for more lessons like this. Portrait Drawing the Smart Way is a complete video course on drawing portraits designed for beginner and intermediate artists. The goal of this logically sequenced course is to provide the learner with a rich learning experience through easy-to-digest modules consisting of video demonstrations and accompanying ebooks. This course covers absolutely everything that you need to know to start creating successful portraits today. We cover everything from the underlying structure of the face, and of course, basic facial proportions. We also take a look at the planes of the face and how light affects each individual plane. We also look at individual facial features. We take a look at the eye from both the frontal view and the profile view. We also take an in-depth look at drawing the nose, again from both a frontal view and a profile view. We also take a look at a step-by-step approach to drawing a mouth and how to create those realistic skin textures by blending white charcoal pencil and graphite pencil applications. We take a look at drawing realistic hair, and we also take a look at 2 proven methodologies for laying out an accurate portrait every time. Now understand, not everyone learns by just watching videos. That's why illustrated ebooks are included with each one of the modules so that you can download the ebook and use it to follow along with the video. The course consists of 19 logically sequenced modules that total nearly 5 hours of video instruction, and of course 18 illustrated ebooks are included as well. So start creating accurate and realistic portraits today and join me in portrait drawing the smart way.